All right, hello and welcome. Take these off. Thumbs up. All right, good deal. See, the chat seems to be working, so we'll see. I moved it over to the left today to hopefully pull it out of screen a little bit, and I played with a couple of the formats on some of the things, so we'll see what people think. But let's get ourselves rolling here. Hi there, Flying Singer. I see you on the runway. This will be it's a relatively short runway for the airplane we're flying. So I get this. Make sure my engine's not too loud. Have a scary moment passing through someone else. So I've been looking for an excuse to take a jet on one of these. And this park worked out very well for that. We'll talk a little bit more about why in just a minute. So I'm going to go and fly up to about 3,500 and then switch to autopilot and fly at about 3,500 for the first part of this trip. Flip out here. So we are in Monterey Bay area. So that's Monterey over to our left. You can see Santa Cruz off to our right. Very pretty little beach to fly on. Alright, so while people are getting settled, a little bit of background on the stream. Each week we pick a new national park to explore together. And this week we're exploring Pinnacles National Park. For those of you with a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, I uploaded the flight plan for you to follow along. For anyone else, there's another way you can watch on the flight events to see kind of where I am relative to a world map. Just let me quick adjust my plane here. Rule number 1, fly the plane, right? So we'll do a little turn. And I try to include how I set up the autopilot when I do these streams, so if anyone is attempting to follow along, I'm hitting nav first, and then I'm going to set my, once I get to about 3,500, I'll set my altitude to hold altitude, and then from there I'll just enable autopilot, and that seems to work pretty well. So I'm leaning in to actually read my monitor. The other thing that I do before these live streams is I research the park and add any new information with sources back to the Wikipedia pages. And the reason I like to use Wikipedia for these is two main things. So one is it's a way to make sure that the facts that we talk about today are checked by others. And two, it's a way to give back to a living body of knowledge that goes beyond our hour here together. So to that end, if you notice anything that's incorrect or could be better clarified, feel free to go and update the wiki pages. As the wiki community often says, be bold, make the updates. I am going to stay outside of the plane just for a moment here, so you can see kind of the surrounding landscape. I see you off on the runway there, Flying Singer. One other thing I'll mention about the plane, it's a very fast plane, and I will be flying with the lever set to 50%, which seems to give me about the 250 knots or so that I'm looking for a cruise. So that'll take about an hour then to do what is essentially a flight down most of the southern half of California. Not all the way to San Diego, but almost all the way to LA. Let's see how this autopilot's working for me. Oh, thank you. I'm getting a cue card that the plane is loud. Okay. Thank you very much. Let me just turn that down real quick. This is the wonderful part about a flight sim too. Look at how easy that was. Didn't work like that in a real plane. Okay. I'll keep ourselves flying here. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So I'm realizing that my text is going to be totally covered when I'm out of the plane. So we'll just do this for today. All right. The other thing to know, we'll vote near the end on which national park we'd like to go to next together. So keep an eye out for that and other conversations, questions, things like that in the chat. And feel free to post thoughts or ideas. I love chatting with all of you. That's part of the reason I enjoy doing this. So anything that occurs to you as you're going along, feel free to post it. Small disclaimer, yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of the flight sim today. In this particular park, we'll talk about the California Condor, and you are not allowed to fly as low as we're going to fly today across this park, especially not taking a jet. But that's the fun of the flight sim, so please don't try any of this in the real world. Without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. So sit back, relax, and let's explore Pinnacles National Park. And our first stop here, actually, so we're going to be flying down Valley, and then we'll cut over to the park. We'll be there in, so let me do this way, my little iPad tricks. So that'll give me a sense of about how long we have. Okay, so I'm going to bring this power back just a little bit here. Okay, I'm glad to see that everyone has Oreos. So we'll use the Oreos in the very beginning here. So I posted up earlier the flight plan, anything else. If anyone needs links to any of those, let me know, or let Fractals know in the chat. All right, why don't we dive into the park then? Fractals, do you mind posting up the poll here, or kicking it off? We'll see how that works. I'll tell you what, I'm going to use my second view here just to see. Let me know, it shrinks down the size of the main screen, but it then makes it easier to see everything else, so we'll flip over that. Let's see, hopefully that poll shows up in a second. So the purpose of Pinnacles National Park is to protect the Pinnacles volcanic formation, talus caves, associated lands and ecosystems for their scientific, educational, and cultural values by caring for their natural processes and wild character while providing opportunities for public enjoyment and understanding of these resources. There is a really nice little, oh, Fractal says it off to a good start. Oh no, it shows up as not showing up, or it says it's already running. That's not great. Alright, I'll tell you what, I'm going to flip back to the big screen, and we're about to fly over the park anyway, so this solves something for me, which is, there is actually a great little video about this park that I'd like to play, but we'll be in the park so soon that it's, I didn't want to detract from the actual seeing the park in the game. Let me see, Fractals, if I do something, let me see if that works. Hey, look at that. I don't know what's up with that. Is there any chance that it's in your profile and not my profile, Fractals? Because I see only one poll in my side. Nice. Okay, so have you been to the park in the last 10 years? Have you been once upon a time, or not yet? I have a kind of fun story. So I was able to fly out in California, and I did a flight that passed right over Pinnacles. We were about 6,500 feet, just off to the east side of it. So I have technically been to the park. I've seen it from the air, which is pretty cool. But I have never walked around, and after we watch this video, I hope that you'll have the same takeaway I did, which is this is a park that is worth going to see in person. So it looks like it's a lot of not yets. This is a relatively recent national park to come around. Flip over to this view. Like I said, I was playing with some of these to see what would work and what wouldn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter from the kind of north side of the park. We're going to pass by the Pinnacles. Actually, let me show a couple of photos from the park real quick while we get going. So this is what the Pinnacles look like. That's a picture of the Pinnacles. That's what the park is named after. And then another kind of view on it just to get a sense of what it looks like. So, and they'll talk about it in the video, but this is the inside of an ancient volcano. So this is what remains of the Nietzschean volcano, I think is how you say it. I have it in my notes somewhere. There's a number of hiking trails that are all around. So you can see there's a little guy kind of off in the distance here, hiking beneath this rock. So there's these hiking trails that are carved into the rock faces. And then there's caves as well. They mentioned the Talus Cave and the park purpose. So this is the entrance to one of the caves. And this is the inside of one of the caves. So it's caves from falling rocks, which is an interesting way to build a cave. And then we'll pass over the Bear Gulch Reservoir in just a moment here. I'll point that out as we do. And those are kind of the couple of highlights from the park. Let me flip back to full screen here. So, all right, so now we're entering the park. Just in front of us here is the actual Pinnacles area. Hey there, Odd Reasoning. Oh, maybe fractals could totally be on my side. That's right. So here we are. So there's the balcony cave trail, and you'll see just below me, you can kind of see where it would be in the real world. We walk through a cave system here. Pinnacles off to our right. They render a little weird. I was trying to get a photo of them, and it just comes up a little bit blocky. Another reason to go visit. And there's that Bear Gulch Reservoir that I mentioned, kind of in the middle of the park here. Oops. Get rid of that bowl. And then there's kind of two big mountains that come through the edge of the park, and those have hiking trails over them as well. So lots of things to go and see when you go visit. Now this park, I chose a fast plane, which is kind of odd if you think about it, because it's a relatively small park. And the reason that I chose a fast plane is the park itself is actually part of a volcano. It's half of a volcano, more or less. The interesting piece, though, is the other half of the volcano is all the way down in LA. It's just to the east of LA. And so what we're going to do today, actually, is we're going to follow the San Andreas Fault, which is what caused the volcano to split in half. And we're going to follow it from Pinnacles, where we just were, all the way down to the other half of the volcano, about 200 miles to the south. And so you can kind of see, you'll be able to see the San Andreas Fault, and then you'll be able to see both halves of that volcano. I will put a little disclaimer, the volcano on the other side is not as interesting to see. That's why it's not a national park too. But it is cool to be able to follow along, and you'll be able to see the San Andreas Fault as we go. Right. So with that, why don't I pull up? This is the kind of overview that the park put out. It's a little overview video. We'll watch the first like 8 minutes or so to start with, and then a little later on we'll watch a couple more minutes of it when we talk about one of our later topics today.
Rising out of the chaparral-covered Gabilan Mountains, east of Central California's Salinas Valley, are rock spires and narrow canyons that bear no resemblance to the nearby foothills. Home to a diverse community of life, these rust-colored pinnacles stand out in the surrounding landscape for good reason. These are the spectacular remains of ancient volcanoes that formed millions of years ago. As the Pacific Plate slides along the San Andreas Fault, it has torn these volcanoes in two, carrying the rock nearly 200 miles toward the north. With the slow passage of time, water and wind, helped by plants and animals, eroded these volcanic remains to fashion the spires and pinnacles found here today. Hidden among the rock, small streams carve deep canyons. These narrow gorges become caves when boulders topple from above, wedging between the rock walls. Flowing water carries away small debris, leaving behind rooms and passages between the light and dark. These unique caves, along with the towering spires and colorful cliffs, have attracted people to this area for thousands of years. Chalon, Mutsun, and other native people lived here for millennia, using bedrock mortars to prepare acorns, pine nuts, and wildflower seed. Using fire, they managed the landscape for food, fiber, and medicine, enhancing grasslands for desired plants and wild game. In 1791, Spanish monks established Soledad Mission in nearby Salinas Valley, and the native people of this area saw rapid change as California became part of Spain, then Mexico, and finally the United States, each change bringing new waves of settlers. In the 1860s, miners came to Pinnacles, convinced that the colored rocks contained copper, gold, and other precious metals, but valuable ore was never found. As miners worked the hillsides, homesteaders began ranching the open valleys and oak woodlands. These early settlers explored the caves and spires, leading tours for curious visitors. In the 1890s, homesteader Schuyler Hayne, inspired by this unique landscape, began a local grassroots campaign to preserve the cliffs and caves found here. These efforts finally paid off in 1908, when President Theodore Roosevelt signed legislation creating Pinnacles National Monument. Today, Pinnacles National Park protects over 26,000 acres, including 16,000 acres designated as the Hayne Wilderness. The park and surrounding lands are home to a diverse community of life, and a wide variety of plant and animal habitat is protected here. All life depends on water, and while most of Pinnacles appears dry, creeks and ponds are found throughout the park. In deep, narrow canyons, sycamore, live oak, and California buckeye make a shady home for frogs and salamanders. Giant valley oaks thrive in open bottomlands, home to many larger animals, such as deer, coyote, and bobcat. Chaparral, a dense canopy of woody shrubs, dominates the landscape, while charming islands of blue oak are scattered throughout the park. The most common tree here is the slender gray pine. Woodpeckers drill holes in the soft wood and bark, storing acorns by the thousands. Throughout the park, a great diversity of life awaits the careful observer, with a wide variety of sights, smells, and sounds. In spring, wildflowers dot the hillsides. Hundreds of species of bees and other insects begin a feast, pollinating wildflowers, trees, and chaparral. After winter rains are long gone, summer transforms Pinnacles from a garden to a desert. Water becomes scarce as surface streams dry up. The hot summer sun turns vegetation from green to brown. Animals, including humans, avoid the heat of the day, seeking relief in canyons, caves, and shadows. Hot days become pleasant summer nights under the stars of the Milky Way. Pinnacles' isolation from big cities preserves dark night skies, where the wonders of the universe are on clear display. Day or night, spring or fall, whenever you visit, Pinnacles is likely to reward you with new pleasures and discoveries. Hiking is a popular activity in the park, and most trails date from the early years of protection and development. In 1933, the boys of the Civilian Conservation Corps arrived in Pinnacles and spent the next 9 years working in the park. The CCC made lasting contributions to the history of Pinnacles, and many of their changes and improvements are still seen today. In the heart of Pinnacles, the steep and narrow section of the High Peaks Trail is a testament to the hard work performed by early trail builders. Clinging to sides of steep cliffs, tunnels, stairs, and passageways are carved into the rock. This rugged and popular trail is a highlight for Pinnacles hikers and explorers. The high peaks are the home to many birds, including swifts, ravens, and prairie falcons. And after an 80-year absence, Pinnacles is once again nesting ground for the endangered California condor.
We will pick up there when we talk about California condors in a little bit. For the moment though, let me switch over and get this plane a little bit higher. So we have been flying along the San Andreas Fault for a little while now. From a bit higher elevation, it's easier to see exactly what's going on, but let me get this set up. So again, sort of doing this live, partially so folks can see how I do it. So I'm setting the desired altitude, and then I'm switching over to vertical speed mode, and I'm going to climb at about 1,000, probably 1,300 or so. This is a pretty fast plane. Then bring in power. That should get us up to 8,500, which will clear the mountains in the southern part of California. Alright, let me flip out in here. So I promise when we get a little bit closer to Wallace Creek as our next stop, it'll be more clear, the San Andreas Fault. You can kind of see artifacts of it here, but it'll pop at you. It's one of the more famous places in the world to go to see it. Which takes us into our first topic here. Fractals, did you get a chance, so I see that it was on your account, no worries. Did you get a chance to get the poll for it? While Fractals is doing that, so the connection to the park, our first topic today is going to be tectonic plates. And the connection to the park is that, just like the video I mentioned earlier, Pinnacles is part of the Nanech volcano, which erupted 23 million years ago, and then near present-day Lancaster, which is where we're headed right now. Well, land just near the volcano. And then it moved along the Pacific Plate, along the San Andreas Fault, for about 195 miles to the northwest, to where it is today. So how do you move a volcano, literally a volcano, 200 miles to the northwest? And the answer is with your plate tectonics, basically. Now, if you haven't yet, this is the time to get out your Oreos. So I went ahead and got a couple of myself. I will eat them. I will show you what to do with them, and then I will eat them myself towards the end. My recommendation would be to have at least 3 if you can. If you don't have as many, that's okay. If you have 4, that would be perfect. And if you want to have more for practice or whatever you need, that's also fine. I have about 6 over here, so you can see where my head's at. And I'll let you know when to pull those out. All right. So what's the best part of the Oreo? Is it the filling? Duh. Is it the outer wafers, which, fun fact, as a kid was my favorite part of the Oreo? Or is it taking the last one before your spouse or sibling, etc. can? And the correct answer, of course, is taking the last one before your spouse or sibling can. Ooh, we got another vote for outer wafers. It's a bold choice, but I like it. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this, but yeah, so I grabbed the gluten-free. I got a gluten-free Oreo, and then I got a regular double-stuffed Oreo, which isn't quite the same, but close enough. So I'll do a little taste testing at the end. Who's curious? I'll let you know. So what is plate tectonics? The key principle of plate tectonics is that the lithosphere, and I'll show you a picture of what that is, exists as separate and distinct tectonic plates which ride on a fluid-like and asthenosphere. And both of those two words will come up enough times that I decided to use the real scientific one. By the end, you'll probably have them down too. So the lithosphere is this top crust, and the asthenosphere, is this little bit more fluid layer beneath that they float on top. So because the crust can move around, then you have these tectonic plates. And so the globe can be divided into different tectonic plates, which look like this. So we have a North American plate is where most of the United States is, and you can see the Pacific plate hitting the North American plate, and that then creates the San Andreas fault line. So that's the high-level view on it. And you can see actually below us, now we're starting to get a little bit more clear on where you can see the San Andreas fault. So if you look, there's sort of a valley that's getting carved out a little bit. That's more or less the fault line. We're flying right along it now. Odd reasoning called out for the wafers. Sorry. Oh yeah, I suppose I can actually see who voted on what. In the old polls, I couldn't see who was voting on anything. It's a good choice. It's a good choice. Actually, what I used to do was I would eat the cream and then store up the wafers, and then I would just eat little wafers, which in retrospect, you can just buy those, but easier to get Oreos, I guess, is good. Alright, let me hide this poll. So how do we discover it? So we have these tectonic plates, but it's sort of a weird thing to come across. The first thing that happened was scientists noticed fossil patterns seem to be interconnected across continents. So if you remember from petrified forests, we had all these different fossil patterns that showed up. Those fossils were spread out in these kind of weird patterns, and scientists realized that if they stuck the continents together, it actually made sense how they would all connect. And that started to hint at this idea of a Pangea, this sort of supercontinent. And so this is a very small little animation of Pangea as it breaks apart. But that was how they came to that conclusion. There's a little bit more that they had to figure out that it was moving plates and how they moved, but that was the kind of initial plates. So once you have these moving plates, there's key locations along them called boundaries, which is where the plates meet. So plate boundaries are associated with geological events such as earthquakes or the creation of topographic features like mountains, volcanoes, mid-ocean ridges, oceanic trenches. A lot of the national parks in the area will fit into that. And earthquakes is a really big one, especially in California, obviously. And so I was curious, has anyone experienced an earthquake or been in a particularly interesting or big one that if you have any good stories, I would love to see them in the chat. I have been in a couple of minor earthquakes, nothing huge, but enough to like wake you up, sort of earthquakes. And speaking of, if you look down here, this is one of the more clear parts to see the San Andreas Fault. So this is called the Chorizo Plain. I'll pull up a photo of that too. But you can see actually where that arrow is pointing down for Wallace Creek. So that is a famous area to go and see. So actually I'll pause here for just a moment. So there's Soda Lake off to the right, and then you can see the San Andreas Fault very clearly down the middle here. And if you look, and you'll see it a little bit if we look down as we're passing, the reason that this is such a useful area for scientists is because, let me pull up this picture. This is what Wallace Creek looks like up close. And so you'll notice that there's the original riverbed, and then let me reload this one. So there's the original riverbed that was here, and then it takes a sharp right turn and then a sharp left turn and continues on. And so you can see where the river originally flowed, and then the San Andreas Fault having moved the river off, it looks like 130 meters to the right. And so if you look down actually in the game, I'll flip back here, as we fly by, keep an eye out and you'll see some of these rivers have this bend to it. So there's one right here that kind of bends over, and there's Wallace Creek will be just up ahead. You'll see it just up there. You'll see it pretty distinctly. But if you go and visit, this is the Chorizo Plain. I'll pull up the last photo that I got for you today for this section. This is what the Chorizo Plain looks like in the real world. You can kind of see the San Andreas Fault there. But if you go to visit, this is one of the things you can go see right along the fault line. I'm catching up on the chat. Odd reasoning, yeah. Too much work. At least the cookie isn't that messy. That's fair. That's fair. Hi there, Flying Singer. Oh, I should continue flying here. So I'll read the chat while we fly over Wallace Creek here. I gotta slow this plane down. So there you can see it, right below us. Flying Singer's doing the right thing. Gotta get nice and low to it. This is where that chat starts to feel more tricky. Odd reasoning, several earthquakes, a couple in Japan, one in Oklahoma. Oh, you got an Oklahoma earthquake, odd reasoning? That's pretty random. One in Japan makes sense. We'll talk about why that makes sense in a second. New Blood does Trace wake up in the middle of the night and partner says, "Oh, that might be the small one before a big one." That's pretty funny. That seems, yeah, that's a good line. I don't know if that would go over very well, but it's pretty funny. Yeah, crazy Tycho. I agree. Something about assembling it yourself. That little bit of extra care. All right, so we'll keep following the San Andreas Fault. You'll see the line as we go. Okay, I'm gonna slow down actually quite a bit here. In my excitement, I had the plane going 500 knots, which is pretty fast plane. All right, so we talked about the principles of plate tectonics. We talked about how they were discovered. There's 3 different types of boundaries that you'll get with plate boundaries, 3 different types of plate boundaries. So you can have a divergent boundary, which looks like this. So these are 2 plates pulling apart. And if you get it in ocean to ocean rifting, then it'll be as the seafloor spreads apart. So this would be like in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see there's this rift here as the plates pull apart. If it's a rift that's occurring continent to continent, then it can create a new ocean basin as it splits far enough. So if you think about an ocean basin splitting in the ocean is, at least to me, it feels more natural, but something that you may not have considered is if a continent has a fault line in the middle of it that's divergent, the continent itself can be getting split apart. And so this is actually going on right now in Africa. So in about 10 million years, this section of Africa is going to break off and start floating away on its own. That's also why there's a lot of volcanic activity and earthquakes in that area. All right, so first Oreo moment here. So our divergent boundary, if you take your Oreo, as so, and crack the top layer here, so you get your nice 2 different tectonic plates. I'm trying to get it so you can see it. Okay, so now I have 2 different tectonic plates. A divergent boundary is when you take your Oreo and you pull those plates apart. And there's your new landmass being formed in the middle. So 1 Oreo down. Okay, so that's divergent boundary. The second kind of plate boundary you'll get is a convergent boundary. And a convergent boundary looks like this. So this is where 2 plates meet and 1 plate slides underneath in a subduction zone. So this is what's going on in the Himalayas right now. There's also the Aleutian Islands, which is the kind of islands off of Alaska, is also a convergent boundary. So that's why these islands take on this shape. That's actually the plate boundary that you're seeing, just manifestation of the plate boundary. All right, and so for your second one, you can crack, oops, so that's why you need practice Oreos. Okay, so your second Oreo, again, you gotta crack off your top wafer here. And this is the most fun one in my opinion. So you gotta somehow get it underneath the asthenosphere, which is your cream here, and then you can pop up that top layer. So there's your mountain formation in the form of an Oreo. So okay, so there's number 2. Oh, odd reasoning. Okay, interesting. Flying Singer, you had some in SoCal. And oh, right, you can see the chat now. I used to read the chat out loud because it wasn't actually on the screen. Yeah, Flying Singer, that's wild. 27th floor during a big volcano or a big earthquake. Crazy Tycho, nice. All right, so there's 2 types of boundaries. The third one you get is a transform boundary. And a transform boundary looks like this. So this is when 2 plates slide alongside each other, the 2 lithospheric plates. And you could say slide, but more accurately they grind past each other because it's just rocks underneath. And in this case, the plates are neither created nor destroyed. So when it's divergent, it's creating new land or new plate. And when it's convergent, then it's destroying one of the plates. In this case, it's just sliding side by side. And of course, that is the San Andreas Fault, which is what we're flying part of right now. Is that kind of side by side. All right, so our last one then, of course, and actually, so take your Oreo, you can crack a little top part again, and if you attempt to slide them side by side, you'll very much get the same sense of what it's like for the two tectonic plates as they attempt to move past each other, and why we get so many earthquakes. So just to recap real quick on the Oreo, so we had the lithosphere and the asthenosphere. And if you look at your Oreo here, the hard upper cookie is kind of the lithosphere. The asthenosphere is that softer cream filling. And so there's your model of the Earth as an Oreo cookie. Okay. Hey there, Flying Singer. I don't know what type of plane that is, Flying Singer. It looks like a jet. Maybe it's just a livery on this one. So plate tectonics, we talked a little bit about why they occur at a high level and how they're discovered and how they work. But what actually causes the plates to move? So it turns out, I didn't know this before I started researching, but there's a lot of debate. Oops, let me flip over here. There's a lot of debate actually on what causes the plates to move around. So the biggest theory is that as the plate that's going underneath another plate in a convergent boundary, that mass being pulled underneath actually creates just the gravity of it is enough to pull the rest of the plate under. So that'll keep the motion going. That's thought to be the strongest driver of plate motion. However, there are plates like the North American plate that aren't subducting underneath any other plates, and they still move. And so there must be something else that's going on in the plate motion. But as far as open scientific questions, this is a very interesting one in my opinion. It's something that impacts all of us all the time. We don't really know why. So where will you see these in your daily life? The most common place in our flight stream here, our live stream here, I call it flight stream in my head, I don't really know why, but is the Ring of Fire. So you may remember this from some of the past episodes we talked about. So there's this long string along the Pacific Plate of where you get a lot of different volcanoes and earthquake kind of activity. So when Odd Reasoning mentioned Japan, it totally makes sense because it's right along that Ring of Fire. And the other one that you may remember is as those plates move, you get the sort of motion that we saw in the Hawaiian Emperor Chain. So if you remember when we went to the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, we looked at this long seamount chain that takes this weird V shape to it. And we said that the reason for that is because there's a hot spot where Hawaii is, and then as the plate moves, it created that sort of pattern. So this is evidence of plate motion, and also evidence that plates change direction randomly and we don't know why, which is another thing that pops up with these. So now it's time for your fourth Oreo cookie, should you have a fourth one. So in this case, you just crack the top off, and you can slide the top of your Oreo just like a plate moving over a hot spot. So there's your formation of Hawaii Oreos. Let's see if I can get that on there. So, all right, and that's the fourth Oreo they got here. So putting that all together, the San Andreas Fault that we're flying over, let's look at a little animation of how all of those different concepts come together and form the actual San Andreas Fault line. This is a good little animation overview. You should see all the different topics we talked about.
About 85 million years ago, several oceanic plates formed the floor of the Pacific Basin. The Pacific Plate was a small southern plate with other plates spreading away from it. Over time, the Pacific Plate drifted north and expanded in all directions by seafloor spreading. New seafloor was continually added to its eastern edge by spreading between the Pacific and Farallon plates. As plate movement continued, the eastern side of the oceanic Farallon Plate slid or subducted under the continental North American Plate. It subducted faster than new seafloor was being created on its western side, causing the plate to gradually narrow. As the Farallon Plate's width decreased due to subduction, it broke into smaller plates, some of which subducted entirely and disappeared. Plate subduction occurred because the cool, dense oceanic Farallon plate sank into the mantle beneath the more buoyant continental North American plate. As the plate descended, it released water, causing the hot mantle to melt. The resulting buoyant magma rose and pooled beneath the surface. From time to time, some of the magma broke through to the surface and erupted in explosive ash clouds and lava flows, building volcanoes. This process continued along the growing volcanic mountain chain in repeating cycles, while the Farallon plate continued to subduct, causing millions of years of volcanic activity along the coast. About 20 million years ago, the San Andreas Fault System began to form when and where the Pacific and North American plates first made contact with one another. Along this boundary, the Pacific plate continued its motion to the northwest toward the Aleutian Islands, moving sideways along the rim of North America. As it slid past, it scraped off slivers of the North American plate and carried them with it. Continental fragments along the borderland were captured by the Pacific plate in this process and moved away, pulling open many of the basins in Southern California. As the plate boundary lengthened southward, it first laid along the Pacific rim of Baja California. About 5 million years ago, a new section of the San Andreas Fault System broke inside the North American continent along the line that is now the Gulf of California. This broke Baja California away from the North American plate and transferred it to the moving Pacific plate. The northern end of Baja California began to ram into Southern California, pushing up many of our local east-west trending mountains and forming the Big Bend in the San Andreas Fault System. The Sierra Nevada Great Valley Block, farther inland, is currently in the early stages of being captured by the Pacific plate and carried northwestward.
Currently in the process of here is still a little ways off, but it's pretty cool to see the artifacts. And I didn't realize that Baja California came from the San Andreas Fault. It makes sense when you see it, but I hadn't thought of it before. Alright, so in summary, the key principle of plate tectonics is that the lithosphere exists as separate and distinct tectonic plates, which ride on a fluid-like asthenosphere. In their motion, plates interact with each other as either convergent, divergent, or transform faults. These fault lines are often the location of earthquakes and volcanic activity. And of course, what's the recommended cocktail when touring the San Andreas Fault? A gin and tectonic. Alright, Fractals, could you cue up the next one here? Perfect, look at that. So our second topic today is about the California condor, which is a type of vulture. So the question is, what is carrion? Is it decaying meat of a dead animal? Is it the boatman on the river Styx? Or, like a cation, positively charged ion, and an anion, negatively charged ion, but neutrally charged? Give folks a second word on that. So the connection to the park is that the California Condor Reestablishment Program has been in place since 2003 in Pinnacles National Park. The first nest since reintroduction was built in 2010, and Pinnacles now manages a population of 25 free-flying condors. And you may remember I mentioned that we would watch the rest of that video, so while people keep voting on that one, let me pull up Chrome here. So we'll watch the last, just a couple minutes here, but it's really good footage of California condor flying. Something real quick to keep in mind, they have a 9.8 foot wingspan. It's 9 feet wingspan.
Condors soar far and wide, reaching the Pacific Ocean in less than an hour. The park's steep cliffs and surrounding lands provide excellent habitat for condors, and in 2003, Pinnacles became a California condor release site. Restoration of wild California condors still faces many challenges, but seeing these magnificent birds soar once again is an unforgettable Pinnacles experience. Pinnacles National.
I'll pause it there. They just do a little sign out. So what is carry-on is we have a three-way tie. It's I don't know. We'll see. So the correct answer is A, decaying meat of a dead animal. I do like the spirit on the boatman of the River Styx, though. That's Karen. And cation and antion, please don't remember it as along with those two. But I thought it was funny that it has the same spelling. Of the car. Fractal's nice. Emeraldsno says unbelievably big when you see them up close. Oh, right, you can see the chat now. That's so cool. Yeah, I really got to get out there and see them. I seem to remember a couple of folks mentioned in past weeks that they've seen California condors, so if anyone has any stories or anything they want to share, it's pretty cool animal. Alright, so you just saw a video of a bunch of them, so I won't pull up many more photos, but they went extinct in the wild in 1987 when all wild individuals were recaptured, and they've been slowly reintroducing them in northern Arizona, southern Utah, Grand Canyon National Park, Zion National Park, as well as coastal mountains of Central and South California and near Baja California, so where we're flying now. In general, they're a type of vulture, and vultures are scavenging birds. They feed mostly on carcasses of dead animals, also called carrion, so there you go. Without apparent ill effects. Some of the New World vultures have a good sense of smell. California condor does not have a good sense of smell. We'll talk about what they do in a second. Old World vultures, though, find carcasses exclusively by sight. One particular characteristic you'll notice in many vultures is their bald head devoid of feathers, and that's because they need to get into the animal carcasses without getting all dirty. So there's another picture of a California condor. Oh, flying singer. Oh no. Yeah. It's a better one to learn in a flight sim, I suppose. So you probably noticed in that video that they did a lot of soaring. So California condors are remarkably graceful when they fly, but they lack a large sternum, and they lack a large sternum to anchor that wing muscle that they have. And because they don't have that sternum, they try to avoid flapping their wings when they can. So if you've ever wondered why they soar so much, it's because their sternum isn't really comfortable for them as far as like the amount of muscle that they have going into their wings. They have been known to fly up to speeds of 56 miles per hour and as high as 15,000 feet. They also prefer to roost on high perches so that they can launch without major wing flapping effort. Like I mentioned, anything to reduce the amount of time they need to spend flapping their wings. Let me do a quick time check. Okay. They have a little bit of interesting things in their so they'll look for a mate around the age of 6. They'll have they mate for life, which is cute. And after they lay an egg, if the egg disappears for some reason, lost or stolen or something, they'll actually lay another egg to take its place, which scientists used when they were trying to repopulate the species. They would take the egg and then condors would lay another one. And so, you can see a little picture of what a baby condor chick looks like. Adorable. I love baby birds. I mentioned they don't have a sense of smell, and so they often spot corpse by looking for other scavengers like eagle or smaller vultures and then going to where they are. They can usually intimidate other vultures away or other scavengers away, except bears and golden eagles, which will fight condor for the right to eat that. So that's a quick introduction to California condors. The kind of high-level summary. California condor is one of the world's longest living birds. Oh, I didn't mention this. They have a lifespan of 60 years. So they mate for life. They live about 60 years long, and they have about, I believe it's an egg a year or so. It's a very a cool bird, but that's also why they had so much problems. They had the same sorts of things that the peregrine falcons ran into, we talked about, where it was like lead bullets they were eating, and then over enough years accumulates a level of toxicity in their system that they can't handle. So they are a type of vulture. They feed mostly on the carcasses of dead animals, that carrion. They also primarily soar. They were extinct in the wild in 1987, but have started to make a comeback since. We're coming up here on Ninach volcano, which is the other half of the volcano from Pinnacles, so we finally made it here. I didn't grab any pictures of it in real life. It's actually just about as interesting in real life as in the game. I was reading some blogs of folks who had done the 200-mile drive to go and do both of them in the same day, and their advice was kind of like, yeah, Pinnacles is the cool one to go see. So, but that's neat. So we've made it from both halves of the volcano. So to close out California condors, I have a little story today. It's about it's about a family of vultures. So a young vulture is sick of eating dead things and wants to be a vegetarian. So he asks his parents whether he can start incorporating some vegetables into their meals. His father is ashamed of him, and he says no. The young vulture asks if he could bring maybe a carrot to dinner, and his mother and father tell him that it's a disgrace to the family and to put the silly notions out of his head. The son doesn't give up, though, and so he begs his parents, what about a cucumber, or just a little lima bean? Eventually his parents get sick of it and relent a little bit. His father tells him, fine, you can have a couple of peas with your dinner, but you have to eat all your roadkill first. And the young vulture pleads, no, but Dad. The father says, no, carry on, my wayward son, and there'll be peas when you are done. That's a carry-on joke. You're welcome. All right, so our person of the week this week is Thomas Chalmers Vint. I'll show a quick picture of him. A fascinating character that I did not know anything about before this, but it was pretty influential in the national park system. Fractals, carry-on bags, good stuff. Oh, Flying Singer, that's cool. I didn't know that. A volcanic plug over there. Neat. Did it show up pretty well in the game? Might have to go check that out. Alright, so Thomas Vint he lived from 1894 to 1967, and he conducted a 5-year improvement. One of the things he did, the reason we're talking about him for this park, is he conducted a 5-year improvement plan for Pinnacles in 1927. He was a landscape architect credited for directing and shaping the landscape planning and development during the early years of the United States National Park System. He worked at the Yosemite National Park and the development of the Mission 66 program, which if you haven't heard about is a really cool one to read about. Mission 66. And those are two of his better known projects, although his influence can be seen at parks across America. His true talents lay in his design elements. You can best describe his work as the kind of rustic and relating to how he's able to harmonize structures with their natural surroundings. At the time when park designers were focused inward to plan appropriate park infrastructure, Vint masterfully dealt with the new influx of people spawned by the ever-growing automobile age. So he was the one who had to figure out, what do we do with all these people who suddenly can visit our parks for the first time? As more people headed to the parks, the facilities were becoming overwhelmed. Vint, however, didn't see it as a negative effect. He knew that the presence of people in the park would help the park service's expansion and ultimately preservation, so as long as the structures harmonized with their environment. So to solve these problems, Vint learned how people would interact with the land and how they'd interact with the structures and presence of others or different elements to it. And then he figured out how to build structures that would not detract from the beauty of the natural park, but still be useful to visitors when they come to see. You can see his design philosophy is similar to earlier landscape architects like Frederick Olmsted, who designed, for instance, New York's Central Park. So if you go to Central Park and you put that side by side in your head with a national park you've been to recently, you may see some overlapping design elements, and that's why. He also was involved in Mount Rainier National Park and a couple of other ones, so he pops up all over the place, but Pinnacles was one of the ones that he was also part of. So that's Thomas Bint. Alright, Flying Sting, I'll have to go check that out then if it looks pretty good. Fractals, I do not understand your joke, but you want to post up the next poll here, and we can vote on where we want to explore next time. So the three options are Death Valley National Park, Mesa Verde National Park, and New River Gorge National Park. Go, thank you very much. Do I do this? Oops. That's the one. Give folks a second to vote there. Thank you, Fractals, posting up the survey, Discord, and Twitter. So today we talked about Pinnacles National Park. We talked through tectonic plates. We had a lot of fun with Oreos, which I hope you all rather enjoyed. This is one of my new favorite ways to explain those concepts. And we talked a little bit about California condors and Thomas Bint. Fractals just posted up the survey. Thank you very much for your feedback on that. It's always helpful, especially since I'm playing with so much formatting stuff. It's useful to know what's distracting, what's helpful. Is the biggest one that's on my mind is the smaller screen of the game like we have it right now. Is that more annoying, or like is it more fun to have it be the full size where you can see everything, or if you want to come hang out in Discord community, always fun to have new folks. We talk about the national parks. We were talking about gluten-free Oreos 2 days ago. Just kind of whatever comes up. Flying, that sort of stuff. And we have a three-way tie again. Fractal's already voted. Does that mean that I get to be the tiebreaker? I suppose so. Okay, so Death Valley, Mesa Verde, or New River Gorge. Oh. Got it, Fractals. Okay. All right, then I guess I get to play tiebreaker. So let's do... Oh, wife should break the tie? Okay. Can I get a 1, 2, or 3 wife?
3.
Ooh, okay. Cool. 3. New River Gorge National Park. This is one of the, I believe, actually the newest national park. So that'll be a lot of fun. We'll be some of the first visitors, I suppose. Well, it depends how you look at it. So I'm excited to explore New River Gorge National Park with you next week. With that, thank you for being my co-pilot today. And until we meet again, stay curious and keep on exploring. I will do a little taste test of the... I'm just seeing the chat. That's funny. Fractals, you should have, I don't know, bribed or something a little bit earlier. So I will stay for a couple minutes and do a little gluten-free versus regular Oreo taste test for anyone who's mildly intrigued by that. But otherwise, that will close out for Pinnacles National Park. Thanks all again, and I will see you next week. All right, let's pull up some Oreos. Yep, Sailor Guy got his vote in. I think that still counts. The poll's still open or not. Yeah, look at that. All right, New River Gorge. Support the wife on that. All right, so I'm going to start with a gluten-free one here. Oops. Has anyone else tried these gluten-free ones? Fractals, I think you mentioned that you were going to try and get them. I'd be curious what you think. I'm going to do a side-by-side real quick. I will say the gluten-free ones seem to fall apart a little bit more chalky than I was expecting, but maybe my memory of Oreos is just not that good. All right, odd reasoning. I'll try just the wafer. All right, so first thing I learned, eating a convergent and divergent plate boundary is much more satisfying than eating a normal Oreo. The other piece, the cream tastes the same. That delicious tastes like an Oreo Fractals, yep. Nubla dos tres. Oh, yeah. That's fair. That's probably not a fair comparison. Odd reasoning. Yep. Sorry, gotta pick up a nickname somehow. Um, so the gluten-free wafer, it tasted the same, but it was a little more chalky, which isn't necessarily bad. But uh, I don't know. I like something about it staying together just a little bit more. So, but I also Nublado's choice. I also made the mistake of getting double stuffed Oreos, and I think if I was comparing simply the experience, the double stuff was always going to win. Although Crazy Tygo's approach of stacking your double stuffed Oreos is maybe the real way to do it. But anyway, cheers. All right. Thanks everyone. It's been fun. I'll see y'all next week.